Tom did not look back at the Muggle platform. He had trained himself out of backward glances years ago, back when the orphanage corridors stank of boiled cabbage and damp wool, and the door at the end could open at any moment to reveal some new rule that punished him for existing. Leaving always felt safer than staying, even when leaving meant stepping into the unknown. The brick barrier swallowed him the way a mouth might, and the world behind it vanished. The air changed. It was still London, still soot and rain, but threaded through with a sharp, clean note like struck flint. People moved with a different confidence here, dragging trunks that seemed to know where they were going. Cages rattled. Owls blinked at the wet light, as if disappointed by the weather. A scarlet train waited like something alive, its sides slick with rain, steam breathing from its iron lungs. Tom stood very still, letting the crowd flow around him, and measured it. He measured everything. That was how you survived when you were small, and the world was larger, louder, and mostly stupid. There were families in clusters, voices raised, hands adjusting collars, cheeks kissed. There were children in new robes that still held the crease of the shop. There were too many parents saying the same things. Be good, write soon, mind your manners, as if the words could protect their precious sons and daughters from a castle they had never seen. No one said anything to him. That was not unusual. Tom had a face that did not invite pity, and did not offer warmth. He had learned early that adults offered kindness only when it made them feel powerful, and children offered it only when it bought them safety. He did not need either. He lifted his trunk handle and walked. The trunk was heavier than it should have been, though it held little. He had made sure of that. There were things he had taken from wolves that no one had noticed missing. Small things, useless things, except that they had belonged to someone else. Proof, if he ever needed it, that he could reach into other people's lives and pull out what he wanted. On the train, he found an empty compartment and slid the door shut. The seat fabric smelled faintly of polish and old sweets. He sat with his back straight and his hands folded and listened to the corridor beyond. Voices blurred. Laughter. The clack of shoes. Someone's mother crying softly, embarrassed by her own softness. When the train lurched into motion, Tom felt the movement in his bones. The station slid away, London receding into smoke and distance, and for a moment he saw, uninvited, the other farewell. A tall man in a long cloak standing in the orphanage's dim parlor, flames dancing at his fingertips as if they were tame. A man with a calm voice and eyes that missed nothing. Albus Dumbledore had called him Tom, as if the name were enough to hold him. He had shown him the wardrobe that burned without ash, had told him not to steal, had known he had stolen, had known everything it seemed, and had still offered him a place. Tom's mouth tightened. He did not like remembering that visit. It was the first time an adult had looked at him without fear or indulgence, and it had unsettled him more than any punishment could have done. A knock at the compartment door snapped him back. Tom did not answer. After a moment, the door slid open anyway, pushed by a girl with frizzy brown hair and damp freckles. A boy behind her with a pale, pinched face and a trunk that looked expensive. "Sorry," the girl said quickly. "Everywhere's full." Tom watched them. The girl's eyes flicked to his clothes and then away, too fast, guilt already blooming. The boy's gaze stayed, cool and assessing. "You can sit," Tom said, because control was best asserted as generosity. They entered, cramped the compartment with their chatter. The girl introduced herself as Miriam, the boy as Adrian. They spoke about wandwood and broomsticks and which houses their parents had been in, as if those things mattered more than the fact they were all about to be placed into a system that would measure them forever. Tom listened, offered little. When the boy asked where Tom's family was, Tom smiled just enough to suggest the question was foolish. "Dead," he said. The girl made a small sound, regretful. The boy's expression shifted, almost pleased, as if death were a kind of pedigree too. Tom noted that, filed it away. He noted everything. Outside the window, the countryside rolled by under a slate sky. The train carried him north, toward the castle Dumbledore had named as if it were a promise. Tom pressed his palm against the glass and imagined stone walls, secrets, power. He imagined a place that belonged to him because he would make it. He did not yet know that something beneath that place was already listening for him, patient as a buried blade. The castle rose out of the night like an accusation. Tom had seen grand buildings in London, cathedrals that tried to shame heaven into notice, government offices that smelled of ink and superiority, but Hogwarts was different. It was older than certainty. The towers cut the low clouds like teeth. Lamps glimmered in windows as if the stone itself had caught fire and refused to go out. The first years crossed the lake in boats that rocked under their weight. Water slapped at the wood, black as spilled oil. Somewhere in the dark, something large moved just under the surface. A ripple, a suggestion. Miriam squeaked and clutched the edge. Tom did not. He watched the water and felt a faint, unreasonable familiarity, as if the lake recognized him. On the steps, cold wind climbed his robes. The doors opened at a gesture from a stern woman whose name Tom did not catch, and the warmth that spilled out carried the rich smell of food and wax. He followed the line into the great hall and looked up. He did not allow awe, not fully. Awe was how people were made small. But he could not deny the scale. The ceiling charmed into a stormy sky. The long tables crowded with faces. The candles floating like captured stars. Every sound, every laugh, every clatter seemed held inside stone that had seen centuries and did not care. At the front sat the staff, and Tom's gaze snagged hard on the man at the far end. Dumbledore. He looked younger than Tom remembered from the orphanage, though not by much. His hair was darker, his posture straighter, his hands still. But the eyes were the same, blue, sharp, calm. Tom's stomach tightened. He had not expected the memory to be sitting there, real and warm-blooded, watching first years file in like offerings. A hat sat on a stool, a cracked, tired-looking hat. The girl with the frizzy hair, Miriam, stared at it as if it might bite. Tom stared too, but for a different reason. A test. A judgment. He had never trusted judgments. Names were called one by one, and children walked up, sat, and waited. The hat dropped over their eyes, and the hall held its breath until the hat shouted a house, and the tables cheered. When Tom's name rang out, Riddle Tom, there was a small flutter of whispers. A surname like that meant nothing to most, but Tom felt the weight of it anyway, like a hook catching on his ribs. He walked to the stool with measured steps. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him. He welcomed it. Fear was a kind of attention. Attention was a kind of power. The hat smelled of dust and old sweat when it settled on his head. Darkness closed around his face. And then a voice, low and intimate, slid through his mind. Well, this is interesting. Tom did not flinch. He did not answer aloud. He answered in thought, controlled and sharp. I will be placed where I belong. The hat's amusement brushed him like a fingertip. Plenty of ambition. Plenty of talent, I suspect. And something else. Something coiled. Tom's jaw tightened beneath the brim. What are you? Just a hat, the voice said, and sounded like it was smiling. But I can see what others miss. You could do well in many places. Clever enough for Ravenclaw. Resourceful enough for Gryffindor. But it's power you crave, isn't it? Tom's fingers curled once on his knees and stilled. He imagined the orphanage matron turning her back. He imagined boys in the courtyard suddenly tripping without knowing why. He imagined Dumbledore's calm disapproval. Power, yes. Power was the only thing that had ever made the world obey. Slytherin, then, the hat murmured, almost pleased. Slytherin, it shouted. The table to the left erupted. Green and silver shimmered in the candlelight. Students pounded the wood, cheered, called welcomes. Tom slid the hat off and walked to the table as if he had expected nothing else. As he sat, a large man with a soft face and gleaming eyes leaned toward him. His robes looked expensive in the way of velvet that had been worn by someone who liked comfort. "Riddle," the man said, savoring the name. "Horace Slughorn. Welcome, my boy. Welcome. I do like to keep an eye on new talent." Tom met his gaze and offered a smile that was neither too eager nor too cold. "Thank you, Professor." Slughorn's eyes flicked over Tom, his posture, his face, the careful way he held himself. Tom could see the man calculating, already thinking of networks and futures. Tom had known men like him at Wolves, charity donors who wanted to feel important. Slughorn wanted importance too, but of a more refined kind. Reflected glory. "You'll settle in nicely," Slughorn said. "And if you ever needed anything at all, you need only ask." Tom nodded as if grateful. At the staff table, Dumbledore looked down the length of the hall. Tom felt, rather than saw, the moment the blue eyes found him. It was like a hand around the back of his neck. Firm, not cruel, but undeniable. Tom lifted his goblet and took a measured drink of pumpkin juice. He did not look away. He did not look down. He let Dumbledore see a polite, unremarkable first-year boy, newly sorted, harmless. Inside, something colder stirred. The man from the orphanage was here, inside the place Tom had been promised. The place Tom intended to claim. And somewhere deep beneath the floor, under stone and older than London, something listened for a language only Tom could speak. Headmaster Dippet rose after the feast, his voice carrying easily through the hall. Tom listened, but only for what lay beneath the words. Welcome. Tradition. Safety. Rules. Diet. Unity. Old men loved rules because rules were walls and walls meant control. Tom appreciated that, though he suspected the headmaster's need for control came from a softer place than his own. When the last of the applause faded, prefects gathered the students. Slytherin flowed out of the great hall like a dark river, their green-lined robes swaying. Tom followed, quiet, letting the others talk. Miriam, now at Gryffindor, threw him a nervous glance as she was shepherded away. Adrian went with Ravenclaw, his pale face pinched with satisfaction. The corridors were colder than the hall, stone sweating faintly, torchlight dancing on armor that looked ready to step out of itself. Portraits muttered as students passed. A fat knight snored in his frame, beer foam caught in painted mustache. A thin witch leaned out of another and whispered something that made a group of older girls squeal and hurry on. The Slytherin prefect, an angular fifth-year named Cassian, led them down staircases that seemed to shift underfoot. Tom watched the movement, noted the way students automatically leaned as steps changed, the way familiarity bred obedience. The castle trained you without you noticing. A dampness crept into the air as they descended. The sound of water became a constant undercurrent, like a breath. The common room lay behind a stretch of blank stone near the dungeons. Cassian spoke a password, and the wall rippled, opening into a low, arched space lit by greenish light filtered through windows that looked directly into the lake. Dark water pressed up against the glass, and sometimes a pale shape drifted past, slow as a dream. Tom sat on a leather sofa that smelled of smoke and salt. Other boys talked around him, comparing wands, boasting about family names. Tom offered nothing of his own. He watched instead, learning the hierarchy. The sons of old families sat with an ease that suggested the world already belonged to them. Boys without that ease tried to claw for it with loudness. Tom had no family and no ease, and yet he felt no need to be loud. He had always owned himself. He found the dormitory that matched his year, climbed into a four-poster bed with curtains thick enough to shut out the world, and lay staring at the canopy. The mattress was softer than any he had ever slept on. That softness should have been a comfort. Instead, it felt like a challenge. Comfort made people careless. Somewhere in the darkness, a lake creature bumped the glass, a dull thud that sent ripples of green light across the ceiling. The sound faded. Silence returned, deep and old. Tom closed his eyes and saw for a moment the orphanage ceiling, cracked plaster, the way the moonlight would spill across the floor in a thin blade. He had sworn he would never go back. He had meant it in a way most people never meant promises. A faint sound threaded through the silence. So soft he might have imagined it at first, a whisper. Not the murmur of boys settling, not the creak of old wood, not the distant hiss of torches. A whisper in a language he knew without ever being taught. SS. Tom's eyes snapped open. He held his breath, listened harder. The sound was not in the room. It was not even in the corridor. It was as if it came from the stone itself, seeping through like water. No one else stirred. The other boys slept, mouths slack, limbs sprawled in careless trust. Tom slid from bed without making a sound. He drew the curtains shut again, leaving his bed apparently occupied, and moved to the dormitory door. The whisper grew slightly clearer when he pressed his ear to the cold wood. Come. Tom's pulse beat once hard, and then steadied. He was not afraid. Fear was for people who did not understand what they faced. This voice, this hiss, felt like recognition, like invitation. He crept into the corridor, bare feet silent on stone. Torches burned low, their light thin and wavering. The castle at night was different, less full of noise, more full of secrets. The whisper tugged at him as if on a thread. Tom followed it past sleeping portraits, down stairs that shifted when he stepped, through a narrow passageway he had not noticed earlier. The air cooled. The sound of water strengthened. The whisper slid ahead of him, always just out of reach, as if leading him deeper. Tom smiled in the dark. If Hogwarts was a fortress, then it had a heart of stone and blood, and something in that heart was speaking his language. Morning brought routine like a net dropped over the castle. Tom woke before the dormitory stirred, washed in cold water that bit at his skin, and dressed with care. He tied his tie neatly, smoothed the robe, checked the line of his hair. Appearances were a language too, and he spoke it fluently. At breakfast he ate quietly and listened. Slytherin talk ran along predictable grooves, whose father knew whom, who had the best broom, which teachers were strict and which could be charmed. Tom said little. His silence made space for others to fill, and in that space he learned more than he would have through boasting. Transfiguration came first. The classroom smelled of chalk and something sharper, metal perhaps. A cat dozed on the windowsill, tail twitching. The students filed in, took seats, unrolled parchment. Dumbledore entered without fuss. He did not stamp for attention. He simply arrived, and the room shifted around him, attention turning like iron toward a lodestone. Tom felt the old irritation rise, quick and hot. He tamped it down. Irritation was a child's feeling. He had no use for it. Dumbledore's gaze swept the room. When it touched Tom, it paused. Only the slightest pause, the kind only someone looking for it would notice. Tom noticed. "Good morning," Dumbledore said, and his voice was mild. Transfiguration is not trickery. It is not simple spell work. It is the art of understanding the nature of a thing so thoroughly that you can persuade it to become something else. Tom's fingers tightened on his quill. Persuade. That was a word Tom liked. The world could be persuaded if you knew where to press. They began with matches, turning matches into needles. Most of the class produced warped, half-formed slivers of metal. Miriam, at the Gryffindor table, looked close to tears as her match sprouted something like a bent claw. Tom watched the match in front of him and felt a strange clarity settle over him, as if the object were suddenly honest. It was wood, yes, but it was also potential. It could be thin, sharp, gleaming. It could pierce. He raised his wand, spoke the incantation, and focused. The match shivered and elongated, wood smoothing into metal until a needle lay where it had been, perfectly formed, sharp enough to draw blood. A murmur rose around him. Tom did not look up. He did not smile. He only set the needle down with care, as if it had always been meant to exist. Dumbledore moved between desks, robes whispering. He paused beside Tom. Very good, Dumbledore said softly. Precision. Tom looked up, meeting the blue eyes. For a heartbeat, the classroom noise faded. Tom saw again the orphanage parlor. Dumbledore's hand steady as flame danced, his calm voice saying, "You are safe." Tom did not like feeling safe. Safety implied dependence. "Thank you, Professor," Tom said. Dumbledore's gaze held his, and there was something there, curiosity perhaps, or caution. Tom could not tell. Dumbledore did not offer his thoughts easily. As Dumbledore moved on, Tom felt the pressure of that gaze remain, as if the man had not really left. After class, students spilled into corridors. Miriam caught up to Tom, breathless. "That was incredible," she said. "How did you do it so fast?" Tom considered her. She was kind, he thought, in the way puppies were kind. She would be useful if he needed a witness to his goodness. She would be a nuisance if she started asking questions. "I listened," Tom said simply. She laughed, relieved, and hurried away. Tom walked alone. He felt the whisper from the previous night nagging at him like an itch. It had not returned. Not in daylight, not with the castle full of voices, but he had not imagined it. He knew that with the same certainty he knew how to hurt people without touching them. He passed a row of tall windows and saw the lake beyond, dark even in day. Something pale drifted close to the glass, then vanished. Tom stopped, watching the water. A cold, familiar thrill crawled up his spine. The castle held something. The castle had spoken to him. And Dumbledore Albus was here, watching, perhaps listening too. Tom walked on with measured steps, and in his head the hissed word echoed again, faint but clear. "Come." Defense against the dark arts was held in a room that felt older than the rest of the castle, as if the stones remembered duels. The walls bore scratches that might have been from careless spells or something more desperate. A faint smell of smoke lingered, even though no fire burned. Professor Marathought stood at the front, her hair pinned back so tightly it looked like it hurt. Her eyes were sharp and unimpressed. "Protection is not cowardice," she said. "A shield is not a wall meant to hide behind. It is a door you close at the right moment." Tom watched her wand movements with hungry attention. He did not care about protection for its own sake. He cared because defense implied attack, and attack implied power. They practiced simple shield charms, the kind that produced a shimmering barrier in front of the caster. Most students managed nothing. A few produced a flicker. When Tom raised his wand, the air in front of him snapped into place like glass. A pale sheen hovered, steady and clean. Marythought's eyebrows rose a fraction. Again. Tom did it again. The shield held. "Good," Marythought said as if the word cost her. "You've had practice?" Tom's smile was small. "Not with magic, Professor." "Then with what?" Tom considered telling the truth. "With hunger. With cruelty. With the constant threat of larger boys and smaller rules." But adults did not like truth when it made them uncomfortable. "I've had to be careful," Tom said instead. Marythought studied him as if trying to see the edges of something hidden. Tom let her look. He offered nothing. After class, he lingered behind, pretending to retie his shoes while other students filed out. He waited until the room emptied, then moved to the shelf at the back where old books sat chained to wood. Some of the chains were broken, the books worn. The titles were faded, written in languages Tom could not read, though he felt a strange pull toward the symbols. A cough made him turn. Marythought stood near the door, arms crossed. "Curiosity is not a sin," she said. "But it can become a habit. Habits shape a person." Tom held her gaze. "I want to understand." "That is what everyone says," she replied. "It's what they say right before they do something foolish." Tom tilted his head, polite, unoffended. "And if understanding keeps me from being foolish?" Marythought's mouth tightened. "If you want to understand, start with what I teach you. Leave the rest for later." Tom inclined his head. "Yes, Professor." He left the room, but the chains, the old books, the taste of forbidden knowledge stayed with him like a flavor on the tongue. In the corridor outside, the castle seemed to shift around him. The staircases moved, yes, but there was something else. A subtle change in the air, a pressure, as if the stone was aware of his attention. Tom walked toward the library. The library was a vast, shadowed space where dust motes floated in shafts of light like tiny ghosts. Rows of books rose like walls. Silence was enforced not by rules but by the atmosphere itself. Even the most boisterous students lowered their voices when they entered. Tom moved between shelves with the ease of someone who belonged there. He ran his fingers along spines, feeling the texture of leather, the raised lettering, the occasional prickle of magic. He found a section on Hogwarts history and pulled a heavy volume free. It thudded onto the desk. He opened it and read, eyes moving fast, absorbing. Founders, houses, quarrels, Slytherin's departure, legends of a hidden chamber, a monster, a purge of those deemed unworthy. Tom's pulse quickened. He read the paragraph again. The words on the page were dry, academic, but beneath them lay something else. A promise of a secret meant to survive. A soft hiss curled in his ear. Tom froze. The sound was not from the book. It was not from another student. The library was quiet, too quiet, and yet the hiss threaded through the silence like a snake through grass. Heir. Tom's breath caught. He did not understand the exact words, but he understood the intent. It was not a random whisper. It was a voice speaking to him specifically. He closed the book with care and stood, moving as if nothing had happened. His eyes scanned the shelves, the stone, the shadows between. No one looked at him. No one else seemed to hear. Tom's mouth curved, almost imperceptibly. He left the library and walked, guided by nothing visible. The whisper pulsed in his mind, stronger now that he had acknowledged it. Heir. He did not know what he was heir to. Not yet. But the castle had held out a thread, and Tom had never been able to resist tugging. He met Eleanor Parker by accident, which was to say he met her because the castle arranged it that way. She nearly collided with him at the end of a narrow aisle, books piled in her arms. One slipped, and Tom's hand shot out to catch it before it hit the floor. His reflexes were fast. They had to be. In a place where people liked to take what they could. Eleanor's eyes widened. She was small, with a mop of dark hair that refused to stay pinned and a face that looked as if it had been made for expressions. Surprise, laughter, worry. Her cheeks flushed. Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. Nay. Tom glanced at the book he'd caught. A beginner's guide to magical theory. The edges were worn, as if she'd checked it out repeatedly. It's fine, Tom said, handing it back. You're in my year, she said, shifting the stack. Slytherin, right? Tom nodded. He watched her carefully. There were two kinds of Muggle-borns at Hogwarts. The ones who tried to shrink to avoid attention, and the ones who tried to earn belonging by being useful. Eleanor looked like the second kind. Useful. Loyal. Easily wounded. You're Tom, she said, as if tasting the name. You were good in Transfiguration. Tom offered a polite smile. Praise was easy. You were too. I wasn't, she said, laughing breathlessly. My needle looked like a dead worm. Tom's smile widened just enough to seem warm. It was not hard. People wanted warmth the way they wanted light in a dark corridor. They reached for it without thinking. Eleanor glanced around as if afraid of being scolded for talking. Are you looking for something? I've been trying to find anything about the Founders. It's like there's more to this place than anyone tells you. No, me. Tom felt the whisper stir at the back of his mind, pleased. He studied her. Why are you interested? Eleanor shrugged, but the movement was restless. Because it's real. All of it. It's not just a story. And if it's real, then maybe it has rules. Maybe there are things hidden. I keep thinking, what if there's something here meant for someone to find? Tom's eyes sharpened. Do you think it would be meant for you? Eleanor's face brightened with embarrassment, then dimmed. I don't know. Probably not. People keep talking like Muggleborns should be grateful just to be here. No. Tom kept his expression neutral. Gratitude was another chain people like to wrap around the necks of those they thought lesser. You're here, Tom said smoothly. That's what matters. Eleanor looked relieved, as if he'd offered her permission to exist. Yes, exactly. They walked together toward the tables. Eleanor talked about Manchester and her father's bookshop and how strange it felt to send letters home and have to stop herself from writing the word magic. Tom listened and filed away details without offering his own. The less people knew about you, the more room you had to shape what they believed. Eleanor sat at a table and began to spread her books out like a small fortress. Tom sat across from her, opened his own volume on Hogwarts history again, and pretended to read. His attention, however, was on the stone beneath the floor. The whisper had quieted, but it was not gone. It throbbed faintly like a heartbeat. Eleanor bent over her parchment, tongue caught between her teeth as she copied a passage. Tom watched the way she wrote her name at the top, careful, as if afraid the ink might judge her too. There was something almost absurd about her earnestness. Tom wondered briefly what it would feel like to believe the world could be kind if you tried hard enough. He did not allow the thought to linger. A faint hiss slid through his mind. Blood. Stone. Down. Tom's fingers stilled on the page. Eleanor looked up. Did you say something? No, Tom said softly. He stood. Eleanor blinked. Are you going? I have something to check, Tom replied. Oh, and right. Eleanor smiled, quick and uncertain. Well, see you? Tom nodded and walked away, leaving her with her books and her hope. The whisper pulled him toward the heart of the castle again. It did not care about Eleanor. It did not care about anyone. It cared only about the one who could hear. Tom moved through corridors with purpose. He passed suits of armor, their metal faces blank, and thought of the monster described in the book. A creature hidden for centuries, waiting for an heir. His hand brushed the stone wall as he walked, and for a moment the whisper surged, so close it felt like breath against his ear. Come. Tom smiled without warmth. He would. Tom waited until the castle slept. It was not difficult. The first years exhausted themselves with excitement and fear, and fell into beds like stones dropped into water. Even the older students quieted, their laughter fading behind dormitory doors. The corridors emptied. The torches burned lower, throwing shadows that made the suits of armor look like crouching men. Tom slipped from the Slytherin dormitory and moved through the dungeons with practiced quiet. He had been mapping the castle by day, counting turns, noting which staircases shifted, learning where portraits led when you asked them politely. At night, the knowledge became his advantage. The whisper guided him. It was stronger now, as if pleased he had returned. It coiled through the stone, always ahead, always pulling. Tom followed it up a staircase that tried to slide sideways beneath him. He adjusted without breaking stride. A portrait of a dour wizard stirred as he passed. Out of bed, are you? It mumbled. Tom did not answer. He did not need to. The portrait fell back into painted sleep, lulled by the castle's indifference. He reached a corridor that smelled faintly of soap and damp. The whisper grew almost eager. Here. A door stood ajar, the kind of door no boy should enter at night. A girl's bathroom. The thought would have made another student blush or hesitate. Tom felt nothing but curiosity sharpened into hunger. He pushed the door open with 2 fingers and slipped inside. The bathroom was cold, tiled in pale stone that reflected torchlight and sickly glints. Rows of sinks stared back like empty faces. The air smelled of water that had stood too long. At the far end, A stall door hung crooked on its hinges. Tom's footsteps echoed softly. He froze, listening for any sign of a patrol. Nothing. Only the drip of a faucet and the whisper, now so close he could almost see it. His eyes scanned the sinks. Most were ordinary, taps of brass basins worn by hands. But one, near the wall, had an odd mark. A small engraving on the tap, not a maker's symbol but a shape. A snake. Tom's breath caught, not with fear but with recognition. The symbol on the page of the history book flashed in his mind. Slytherin's crest, the serpent. He stepped closer. The engraving was subtle, meant to be overlooked by anyone who did not know to look. Tom traced it with his fingertip. The whisper rose into a clear hiss. "Speak." Tom's lips parted. He did not know why he understood what to do, only that the knowledge rose from somewhere deep, a place untouched by wolves in London and the orphanage matron's rules. A place older. He leaned toward the tap and let the words slip out. Not English, not Latin, but something that felt like the sound of scales sliding over stone. The snake on the tap seemed to quiver. With a low grind, the sink shifted. The tiles around it trembled, and a seam appeared in the floor where there had been none. The stone split open like a wound, revealing darkness beneath. Tom stared down into it. A pipe, wide enough for a person to slide through, vanished into black. A faint draft rose from it, carrying a smell that was not sewage but something sharper. Old air, old stone, something like dust and bones. The whisper was now triumphant. "Down. Down." Tom's heart beat hard once, then steadied. He looked around the bathroom again, ensuring no one had entered, then swung his legs over the edge and lowered himself into the opening. The stone was cold against his palms. The drop was steeper than he expected, his body sliding into the pipe, robes catching and then slipping free. He went down fast, faster, breath rushing out of him as the pipe carried him like a throat swallowing. The darkness pressed in. Tom's wand was in his hand, but he did not light it yet. He wanted to feel this. He wanted to know it. The pipe curved, then spat him out onto a slick stone floor. He landed hard, palms stinging, and for a moment the silence was absolute. Then the whisper spoke again, no longer faint. It filled the tunnel with sound, a hiss that seemed to come from the walls themselves. "Welcome." Tom pushed himself upright and lifted his wand. Light flared, pale and thin. The tunnel stretched ahead, carved from stone, walls damp with age. The floor was littered with shed skin, pale, translucent scraps that made Tom's skin crawl with excitement. Something had been here. Something large. Something alive. Tom walked forward, wand raised, footsteps echoing. He did not know, not yet, that he had just stepped into a secret that had waited centuries for him, patient as poison. The tunnels beneath Hogwarts did not feel like part of the school. Above, corridors shifted and portraits gossiped and the air carried the scent of food and ink and children. Here, there was only stone and damp and an old silence that made Tom's breath sound too loud. The passage sloped downward, then widened. Water trickled somewhere unseen. Tom's wand light caught glints on the floor, coins perhaps long ago dropped and never retrieved. He stepped over them without slowing. He did not care about money. He cared about what money could buy. Access, influence, control. Here, something far greater waited. The hiss continued, guiding him like a hand at his back. This way. Tom followed, deeper and deeper, until the tunnel opened into a cavern so large his wand light could not reach the ceiling. The air changed again, thicker, colder, laced with a scent like iron. His light fell on a wall of carved stone. A face emerged from the darkness. The vast statue of a man, bearded, stern, eyes carved into permanent disdain. Salazar Slytherin. The name came to Tom without effort, as if the statue itself had whispered it into his mind. The statue's mouth was a dark slit. Tom stood at the edge of the chamber, wand held steady, and felt something in him answer the place. The chamber did not welcome him with warmth, but it recognized him, like a lock recognizing the shape of a key. He took a step forward. His footsteps echoed, small against the stone. "Hello," Tom said aloud. Not because he expected an answer in English, but because speaking made the moment real. The hiss rose, louder now. The sound of something waking. Heir. Tom's skin prickled. He lifted his chin. Yes. The statue's mouth moved. No, the statue did not move. Stone did not move. But the darkness inside the mouth shifted, and a sound like scales dragging over stone rolled out of it. Tom's wand light caught a flash of pale green, then another. Something enormous slid forward, filling the opening. A head emerged, triangular, crowned with ridges, eyes like lamps. The basilisk. Tom had never seen anything like it. Even in the orphanage, when he had watched spiders crawl in corners and rats skitter under floorboards, he had never felt this. This was not mere life. This was ancient life, bred into weaponry. The creature's gaze fixed on him, and for a heartbeat Tom felt the instinctive animal urge to recoil. Then his mind snapped into place, cold and commanding. He did not step back. He did not look away. He spoke. The language poured from him like breath, hissed and sharp, words that felt like they belonged to the stone as much as to his tongue. The basilisk halted. Its eyes narrowed, focusing not with hunger but with recognition. It lowered its head slightly, the way a dangerous animal might lower its head when deciding whether to strike or obey. Tom's heart hammered against his ribs. He did not let it show. "What are you?" he asked in the same language, because English felt too small here. The basilisk's answer was not words in the way humans used them. It was sensation and meaning wrapped in hiss. "Sleep, wait, serve." Tom's mouth curved. "Serve me." The basilisk's body shifted, massive coils rippling. It lowered further, a gesture that was unmistakable in any language. Submission, reluctant but real. Tom stepped closer, careful to keep his wand light angled so he did not meet its eyes directly. He had read enough about dark creatures to know the danger. He could feel the heat of its breath, smell the sharp, reptilian musk. "This is Slytherin's chamber," Tom said softly, almost reverent. "He built it." The basilisk's hiss seemed to echo that reverence, though whether it was for Slytherin or for the simple fact of being awake, Tom could not tell. Tom walked along the edge of the chamber, circling. He saw bones piled in corners. Small bones, animal bones perhaps, though some looked unsettlingly human. He saw scratches in stone where the basilisk's body had passed over decades, centuries, leaving marks like slow lightning. He saw, in the far wall, a tunnel leading away. Another passage, one that looked like it might connect to pipes, to the school above. A sudden understanding clicked into place. This creature could move through the castle unseen. Tom's pulse quickened. Not with fear, but with possibility. The story in the library book was not just a legend. It was a mechanism. A weapon hidden in the belly of the school, waiting for someone who could speak the right words. Waiting for him. He stopped before the statue and looked up into the carved face. The stone eyes stared down, unblinking. "I am your heir," Tom whispered. Not to the statue, but to the chamber itself. The basilisk hissed, and the sound filled the cavern like applause. Tom felt something settle in him, heavy and bright as molten metal. Wolves had been a cage. London had been a battlefield. Hogwarts, for all its rules, had seemed like a sanctuary. But this was something else. This was power that had been waiting, and Tom had never been good at leaving gifts unopened. Tom returned before dawn, sliding back through the pipe and sealing the entrance behind him with a hissed word. The sink shifted, tiles smoothing, the seam vanishing as if it had never existed. He stood in the empty bathroom for a moment, listening. Only dripping water answered. He walked back to the dungeons with the careful calm of a boy who had merely gone for a midnight stroll. The corridors did not challenge him. The portraits did not wake. The castle held his secret like a tongue holding blood. In bed, Tom lay staring at the dark. His body ached faintly from the climb, but his mind was too sharp for sleep. He replayed the chamber, the statue, the basilisk's eyes, the sensation of the creature's obedience like a leash tightening in his hand. "Serve me." The words tasted right. He thought of Slytherin, the founder who had built a hidden room for his ideals, and felt a strange kinship. To build something that could outlast you, that was ambition. Tom's ambition had always been smaller, shaped by wolves. Survive, escape, never be helpless again. But now the shape expanded. If there was a creature beneath Hogwarts that could kill with a look, and if it would obey him, then the world was not a fixed thing. It was clay. He could do things here. He could make this place his in a way no teacher or headmaster could prevent. He could make people fear what they did not understand. But fear, Tom reminded himself, was a tool, not an end. A tool used poorly could cut the hand that wielded it. He closed his eyes and forced himself to think, not dream. What did he want? He wanted to belong here. Not as a guest, not as a charity case, but as someone the castle itself had chosen. He wanted to be more than an orphan with a cheap suitcase. He wanted a name that meant something. He had one, perhaps, already. Heir. He could not yet see how to use the basilisk without drawing attention. The castle was full of eyes, prefects, teachers, ghosts, and Albus. The memory of those blue eyes sharpened Tom's thoughts. Albus Dumbledore had seen something in him at the orphanage. Tom had felt it. Not fear, not pity, but awareness. The man noticed. The man watched. Tom did not like being watched unless he controlled what was seen. He listened to the slow breathing of the other boys. One murmured in his sleep, turned over, sprawled an arm out. They were children still, stuffed in ways Tom could not afford. If he used the basilisk, he could choose victims who would not be missed. But Hogwarts was not wolves. Here, every child had a family. Every child had a place. Disappearances would be noticed. Tom's fingers curled into the sheet. He wanted to test the monster. He needed to know how far his control reached. But he also needed the school to stay open. Hogwarts was the one place in the world that had offered him something without demanding he grovel for it. If the school closed, he would be sent back. The thought made something cold and vicious flare in him. He would not go back. He would not be trapped again behind wolves' locked doors, listening to the matron's footsteps. He would rather burn the building to the ground. Tom turned his head toward the dormitory window. It showed only darkness. The lake pressed against the wall, deep and soundless. Yet he imagined the basilisk coiled beneath him, immense and patient. Wait. Serve, White. Tom's lips parted in silent words. Not yet, he told himself. Not yet. But soon. He fell into sleep at last. Not a child's sleep, but a thin, controlled drift. And in it he dreamed of stone mouths opening and a voice hissing his title like a crown being placed. The first time Tom loosed the basilisk, he did it with the carefulness of someone handling poison. He waited for a night when the castle was restless. Wind clawing at windows, rain drumming on stone, students murmuring about homesickness and storms. The noise would mask other sounds. The confusion would blur edges. In the bathroom, he whispered the command again, felt the entrance yield, slid down into the pipes. The chamber greeted him with damp breath and ancient silence. The basilisk stirred, eyes like pale fire in the wanlight. Tom kept his gaze angled. "Move!" he hissed. Through the castle, quiet. The basilisk's response was a low, pleased sound, like a blade being drawn. And no killing, Tom added, because he could not risk it. He said the words with reluctance that surprised him. He did not mind death in the abstract, but death here would be noticed. The basilisk's hiss curled around him, something like amusement. Tom stiffened. Obey. The creature lowered its head, and Tom felt the subtle shift of control settle again. He climbed back up, sealed the entrance, and returned to the dungeons, heart beating with restrained excitement. The next morning, whispers ran through the great hall before the first years even reached their seats. "Did you hear?" Miriam's voice floated from the Gryffindor table, thin and shocked. "They found him by the third-floor corridor." Tom kept his face smooth as he poured pumpkin juice. Around him, Slytherins leaned in, hungry for scandal. "Found who?" someone asked. "A boy," Miriam said, eyes wide. "From Hufflepuff. He's stiff, like stone. They carried him to the hospital wing." A hush rippled. Tom's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. He let his surprise show, small and believable. He had ordered no killing. Petrification, then. That was acceptable. Less final. Less likely to close the school. Still, the speed of it made his pulse quicken. The basilisk had moved through the castle unnoticed and struck within hours. He glanced down the Slytherin table, saw older students smirking, saw younger ones with nervous excitement. Fear tasted sweet to them when it was not aimed in their direction. Slughorn rose, tapping his goblet for attention. Now, Horace called, forcing cheer into the hall. "No need for panic. The staff have everything under control." "None." His gaze swept over Slytherin, lingering on Tom for half a heartbeat. Tom's smile was polite, innocent. After breakfast, the corridors buzzed with rumor. Some said the boy had been cursed by a jealous rival. Others claimed a ghost had done it. A group of Ravenclaws insisted it was a prank gone wrong, though their voices shook. Tom walked toward class with the calm of someone unafraid. Inside, his mind ran like a clock. Where? Third floor corridor. How? The basilisk could not have stared directly at him unless the boy had looked into its eyes. But then he would be dead. Petrified meant indirect viewing. Tom's memory flickered. The corridor near the third floor had suits of armor with polished breastplates. It also had a series of windows. If rain had leaked in, puddles might have formed on the stone. A reflection. The boy might have seen the basilisk's eyes in water. Tom's mouth twitched. The castle itself had helped, turning the monster's deadly gaze into something less final. A girl in the corridor sobbed as she spoke to a friend. He was just walking to Charms. He said he saw something moving, like a shadow. And then, nothing. None. Dummy. Tom slowed as he passed, letting his expression soften. The girl did not look at him. She did not see danger. She saw another student, quiet and polite. Good. In Transfiguration, Albus's eyes were sharper than usual. He spoke of precision, of control, and Tom felt the words land like stones. When Albus walked between desks, his gaze flicked to Tom's hands, to the way Tom held his wand, to the calm line of his mouth. Tom did not flinch. At lunch, the talk intensified. At dinner, it had become a storm. Tom sat in the green-lit Slytherin common room that night, listening to older boys argue about whether the school would close, whether the ministry would intervene, whether this was proof the world was breaking. Tom stared into the fire and thought of the basilisk's eyes. He thought of the boy lying rigid in the hospital wing. He felt a thrill he did not bother to name. He had reached into Hogwarts and made a change, and no one knew it had been his hand. 2 days later, another student was found petrified. This time it was a Ravenclaw girl, her hands still on the banister of a staircase that had shifted beneath her. Her eyes were open, staring at nothing. The staircase was cordoned off with rope. Professors moved like dark birds through corridors. Prefects were ordered to patrol in pairs. Whispers took on new shapes, more frightened, more angry. Tom watched it all with a stillness that felt almost holy. Fear made people honest. Fear stripped away their masks. In the great hall, Armando stood and spoke in a voice that tried to be reassuring. "We are investigating. the headmaster said. "You will remain in your common rooms after curfew. You will not wander. You will be safe." The words sounded like a lie even as they were spoken, because safety was never guaranteed. Tom knew that. The children in the hall were learning it. After dinner, students clustered in tight knots, talking in low voices. Eleanor found Tom near a window and looked up at him with an anxious crease between her brows. "Do you think it's, you know?" she whispered. "The chamber." Tom tilted his head as if considering. He could see her fear trying to make meaning. People hated chaos. They would invent monsters if it gave them a story. "The chamber is a myth," Tom said smoothly. Eleanor swallowed. "But 2 students, and they were both, like me." Tom kept his face carefully neutral. Both Muggle-born then. The Basilisk had chosen as Slytherin's legend demanded, drawn perhaps by blood, perhaps by some old command woven into its making. Tom felt a small flare of satisfaction. The monster understood its purpose without needing Tom to specify. Eleanor's fingers twisted together. "My mom wrote today. She asked if I'm safe." I didn't know what to say. "No." Tom watched her, and for a moment he felt the faintest tug of something almost like irritation. Not at Eleanor, but at the way she clung to her mother's concern like a lifeline. Eleanor had never had to be alone the way Tom had. She had never had to build herself from nothing. "You should tell her you're fine," Tom said. "There's no point worrying her." Eleanor nodded, grateful, then hesitated. "Do you ever miss home?" Tom's smile did not change. "No." Eleanor blinked, as if startled by the bluntness. "Oh, right. I mean..." Tom stepped away before she could ask more. He walked through the corridors toward the library, but his attention was not on books tonight. It was on the staff. He had learned the patterns of teachers moving through the castle, who patrolled where, who lingered, who spoke to whom. He watched from behind a tapestry as Horace hurried down a corridor, face pale beneath its usual pink. Horace disappeared through a door near the headmaster's office. Tom waited, counting breaths, then moved closer, keeping to shadows. Through the thick wood, voices murmured. Armando's, measured and tired. Horace's, fretful. Another voice, calm and low, Albus. Tom's fingers tightened on the stone. He could not hear exact words, but tone carried meaning. Armando sounded pressured. Horace sounded frightened. Albus sounded thoughtful, dangerous. Tom pressed his ear closer. "Pattern," Albus said quietly. "Targeted. Ministry," Armando murmured. "They'll insist." "Closing," Horace breathed, horrified. "You can't. Not with the governors." Tom's mouth tightened. Closing. That word hit like a threat. He had known it was possible, but hearing it spoken made it real. "We will not panic," Albus said. "We will watch. We will search." The door opened suddenly. Tom stepped back into the deeper shadow of a statue niche, heart perfectly steady. Horace came out first, wiping his brow with a handkerchief, muttering. Armando followed, face drawn. Albus emerged last. Albus paused, just outside the door as if listening for something. His head turned slightly, gaze sweeping the corridor. Tom held still, pressed into stone. For a moment, Albus's eyes fixed on the statue niche. The torchlight caught the blue, making it bright as ice. Tom did not move. He did not breathe. Albus's gaze lingered. Then Albus turned away and walked down the corridor, robes whispering. Tom let his breath out slowly, soundless. His pulse did not quicken. He had lived his whole life under watchful eyes. He knew how to hide in plain sight. Still, as he moved away, the whisper in his mind stirred again, soft and pleased. Fear, fear. Tom's lips curved. Fear was spreading exactly as it should. But closing the school was not part of Tom's plan. Not yet. The next week, became a tightening. Curfew was enforced with severity. Prefects marched students to common rooms as if herding livestock. Teachers appeared unexpectedly around corners. The air in the corridors felt taut, like a rope pulled too tight. Tom adjusted. He always adjusted. He stopped wandering at night. He stopped returning to the bathroom. The basilisk remained below, coiled in darkness, waiting. Tom did not like leaving a weapon unused, but he liked being sent back to wolves even less. He focused instead on being seen. Seen as normal, seen as dutiful. He answered questions in class without sounding eager. He helped a first-year Slytherin boy find his way to astronomy when the boy got lost, then let the boy tell others how kind Tom had been. He smiled at professors in corridors. He became, slowly, the shape people expected of a well-mannered student. And yet the attacks continued. A Hufflepuff boy found Petrified near the kitchens. A Ravenclaw girl stiffened beside a mirror. Always Muggle-born. Always the same frozen terror, the same blank stare. The castle trembled with fear and anger. One afternoon, as Tom left History of Magic, Albus was waiting outside the classroom door. The corridor around them was empty, unusually so, as if the castle itself had drawn back to listen. "Tom," Albus said, and the way he used the name made it feel like a hand closing. Tom stopped, posture respectful. "Professor." Albus's gaze rested on Tom's face, on the careful calm. "How are you settling in?" Tom's mind moved fast. The question was too gentle. It meant nothing on its surface. Underneath, it was a probe. "Very well," Tom said. "The school is extraordinary." "It is," Albus agreed. "And yet extraordinary places sometimes draw extraordinary troubles." Tom kept his expression politely puzzled. "Do you mean the attacks?" Albus' mouth tightened slightly. "Yes." Tom waited, allowing silence to encourage Albus to speak more. People often did when silence made them uncomfortable. Albus leaned against the stone wall. Torchlight warmed his hair, but his eyes remained cool. "You were raised among Muggles." Tom felt a small, sharp irritation flare. He suppressed it instantly. "Yes. That can be difficult," Albus said softly. "Coming into a world you did not know. Finding your place." "Now." Tom watched him. Albus's voice held no pity. There was something else there, an invitation, perhaps, to speak honestly. Tom did not trust invitations. "I've found my place," Tom said. Albus's gaze did not waver. "Have you?" Tom allowed a faint smile. "I'm in Slytherin. I'm doing well in my classes. I'm not frightened." Albus' eyes narrowed slightly. "You should be careful about not being frightened," he said. "It can make a person reckless." Tom's smile stayed in place. "I'm not reckless, Professor." Albus studied him for a long moment. The corridor seemed to hold its breath. Then Albus spoke again, quietly. "If you hear anything unusual, anything at all, you will tell me." It was not a request. It was not even quite an order. It was a statement that assumed compliance. Tom felt a coldness spread in his chest, slow and steady. Albus was watching him. Albus suspected of what, Tom did not know. But suspicion itself was danger. "I will," Tom lied, and the lie slid out as smoothly as breath. Albus nodded once, as if accepting the answer, though his eyes suggested he accepted nothing. "Good. Go on, then." Nay. Tom inclined his head and walked away. He kept his pace even. He did not allow his shoulders to tense. He did not allow the urge to look back. Only when he turned a corner did he let the mask slip for a heartbeat. His face hardened, eyes dark. Albus had spoken to him the way Dumbledore had spoken at wolves, with calm authority and an unsettling awareness. It had been tolerable then because Tom had not yet had anything to hide. Now it felt like a threat. The whisper stirred in his mind, faint but present, as if the stone itself enjoyed the tension. Watched. Tom's fingers flexed at his side. He did not like being watched. He would have to become better at hiding, or he would have to become so powerful that being watched no longer mattered. Rumor became scripture in the absence of truth. By the second week of petrifications, the word chamber slipped into conversations like a curse. Students scribbled it in margins. They whispered it into pillows. Pureblood boys said it with pride. Muggle-born students said it with dread. Eleanor stopped sleeping well. Tom could see it in the shadows beneath her eyes when he passed her in corridors. She clutched her books tighter. She jumped at sudden noises. Once, he saw her flinch when a suit of armor shifted in its stand. She cornered him after charms, voice shaking. "Tom, please, do you think they're going to send us home?" Tom regarded her. "Who?" "Me," Eleanor said, and anger flared through her fear. "People like me. They keep saying, Slytherin's monster." Tom's gaze sharpened. "Who is saying that?" Eleanor hesitated, then named an older boy, a pureblood from Gryffindor, who had been loudly repeating jokes about mudblood in corridors as if trying on cruelty for size. Tom nodded slowly, as if filing away the information. In truth, he was. Names mattered. People who spoke openly were often useful later, either as tools or as examples. "They won't send you home," Tom said. "The school would never admit it can't protect its students." Eleanor looked torn between relief and horror. "That's not comforting." "It's true," Tom replied. Eleanor's mouth tightened. "How are you so calm?" Tom studied her, and for a moment he considered answering honestly. "Because fear is for those who believe they have something to lose." But Eleanor did not need that truth. "Because panicking doesn't help," Tom said. Eleanor looked away, swallowing. "I wish I could be like that." Tom watched her walk away, shoulders hunched, and felt something like disdain. Eleanor wanted to be brave because she thought bravery meant being good. Tom wanted to be fearless because fear was weakness. That afternoon, another student was found. Tom heard the scream before he saw the body. It echoed through the staircase hall, sharp enough to freeze movement. Students poured in from corridors, faces pale, eyes wide. A Ravenclaw boy lay slumped against the banister, limbs stiff, head tilted at an unnatural angle. His eyes were open, reflecting torchlight like glass. Eleanor appeared at the edge of the crowd, hand pressed to her mouth. Her breathing came fast, shallow. Teachers arrived quickly. Merithought pushed students back with a sharp command. Horace swept in, face flushed and angry. Tom stood at the edge, watching. He looked at the boy's eyes and saw the faintest glimmer of reflection, something the boy had seen just before he froze. A suit of armor stood nearby, polished breastplate catching light. Tom's mind clicked through the mechanics. The basilisk's eyes, reflected, not direct. Petrified, not dead. Good. Good. And yet, a tightening in Tom's chest did not ease. He had not released the basilisk since the first night. He had not opened the chamber again. And still the attacks continued. The thought chilled him. The basilisk was obeying the old command, perhaps not his. It had been told long ago to purge, and waking it had set that command in motion. Tom could order it not to kill, yes, but could he order it to stop entirely? Could he put it back to sleep? He had assumed control was simple. Control was never simple. The staff herded students away. Tom walked with the flow, face composed. Eleanor stumbled beside him, tears trembling at the edges of her eyes. "This can't keep happening," Eleanor whispered. "They're going to close the school. Or someone will die," she did not say, but Tom heard it anyway. Tom's fingers curled in his robe. The idea of death did not bother him. The idea of consequences did. He glanced down a corridor, saw Albus speaking in low tones to Armando, both faces grave. Albus's gaze lifted and caught Tom's again for the briefest instant. It was not accusation. It was awareness. Tom's stomach tightened. That night, In the Slytherin dormitory, the whisper returned stronger than ever, hissing through the stone like a river through cracks. More, more. Tom sat upright in bed, eyes open in the dark. The other boys slept, unaware. The green lake light wavered on the ceiling like a sick dream. Tom whispered into the darkness, in the language only he and the monster shared. "Stop." The stone did not answer. The whisper only laughed, hissing. Soon, Tom's jaw clenched. He swung his legs out of bed. If he had awakened something he could not command, he would have to learn quickly how to put it back. Tom returned to the chamber with anger in his veins. The bathroom was empty, silent, the sink still innocently in place. He whispered the command, and the stone yielded again. The pipe swallowed him, cold and slick, and he slid into darkness like a thought sinking into sleep. The chamber met him with the same ancient breath. The statue loomed. The basilisk was already awake, its coils shifting, the sound of scales scraping stone like slow thunder. Tom lifted his wand, casting light. He kept his gaze careful. "You have been hunting," he hissed. The basilisk's response was a ripple of satisfaction. "Purpose." Tom's fingers tightened on his wand. "I did not command it." The basilisk's eyes narrowed, and Tom felt something like amusement again, cold and inhuman. Old command. Blood. Tom swallowed the flare of frustration. "You obey me." The basilisk lifted its head slightly, and Tom felt in that movement a challenge. Not open defiance, but a reminder of what it was. Ancient, bred for killing, bound by magic older than Tom's schooling. Tom's voice sharpened. "You will stop." The basilisk hissed, and the sound filled the chamber with the weight of refusal. Tom stepped closer, heart pounding. He was 11, yes, but he was not small here. He was the one who could speak. He was the one who had opened the mouth in the stone. He forced his mind into stillness and spoke again, slower, more deliberate, letting the language sink deep, wrapping the command in certainty. "Sleep." The basilisk's head lowered a fraction, then lifted again. Its body coiled tighter, restless. Tom felt a chill. It did not want to sleep. He thought of the whispers in the walls. He thought of the way the attacks had continued without him. Waking it had not made it his. It had made it active. He needed leverage. His eyes flicked to the bones in the corners, to the dark stains on stone that could have been old blood. The basilisk had eaten. It had fed. It had no reason to heed a child's command unless magic compelled it. He had no spell for that. He had only the language. Tom's mind raced. In the library book, the chamber had been a weapon for a belief. Purity. The basilisk was not a pet. It was an extension of Slytherin's will. Tom swallowed. Then he spoke again, not as a boy ordering an animal, but as an heir invoking legacy. "I am Slytherin's blood. I am the voice you were bred to answer. You will sleep because I say the time is not yet." The basilisk stilled. Its eyes narrowed. The chamber seemed to listen. For a heartbeat, Tom thought it might strike. Then slowly, like a mountain settling, the basilisk lowered its head. Its coils loosened. The scraping sound ceased. Tom held his breath. He did not move. He waited, wand light steady. The basilisk's eyelids slid shut, thick and heavy. Its body sank, settling into the stone floor's shallow grooves, as if it had always belonged there. A deep, slow breath shuddered through it, and then the chamber was quiet again, save for the trickle of water. Tom let his breath out. His hands trembled slightly, not with fear but with the aftershock of near loss. He curled his fingers into fists until the shaking stopped. He stared up at the statue. "I can command you," he whispered, half to convince himself. "I can." The stone face offered no answer. Tom turned and walked back toward the pipe, sealing the chamber behind him with a hissed word. The sink shifted back into place. In the bathroom, he leaned over the basin and stared at his reflection in the dim light. His face looked pale, sharp, older than 11, in the way hunger made children older. He had awakened something ancient, and it had almost slipped his leash. He could not allow that again. Back in bed before dawn, Tom lay awake, mind whirring. The attacks would stop now, he thought. They had to. The basilisk slept. But he did not feel relief. He felt only a sharpened awareness. Power was not something you found and kept. It was something you managed, constantly. Like a blade that could cut the wielder as easily as the enemy. And Albus was watching. Tom closed his eyes and imagined the future, not as a boy imagining adulthood, but as a strategist imagining conquest. He would learn more spells. He would learn more history. He would learn how Slytherin had bound a monster to his will so completely it could not disobey. Tom's mouth curved in the dark. He would become that kind of magician. For 3 days, there were no new petrifications. The castle did not relax. Fear did not evaporate that quickly. It lingered in corners, clung to stairwells, sat heavy on students' shoulders. People still jumped when portraits spoke too loudly. They still glanced over shoulders in corridors. Muggle-born students still walked in groups, voices low, eyes darting. But the absence of new victims began to shift rumor again. Some said the curse had ended. Others insisted it was only waiting. A few proclaimed loudly that the Heir had decided to pause, as if the attacks were a theatrical performance. Tom listened and said nothing. In the Great Hall, a man from the ministry arrived on the 4th day. He wore a dark cloak and a hard expression. He spoke to Armando in low tones near the staff table while students pretended not to watch. Armando nodded and frowned and nodded again. Horace hovered nearby, wringing his hands beneath his robes. Albus stood slightly apart, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the ministry man with quiet intensity. Tom watched Albus more than he watched the ministry. The ministry could only respond to visible evidence. Albus looked as if he suspected invisible truths. That night, Tom was summoned. It was done without drama. A Slytherin prefect approached him in the common room and murmured, "Headmaster wants to see you." The prefect's tone suggested Tom should feel honored. Tom rose smoothly, heart steady. He followed the prefect through corridors that felt colder than usual, torchlight trembling as if uncertain. The portrait guarding the headmaster's office demanded a password and then swung open with a sigh. Inside, the office smelled of ink, old parchment, and something faintly floral. Fawkes was not there. Tom did not yet know that name. But a small, sleeping bird in a cage stirred as they entered, then tucked its head again. Armando sat behind a broad desk, hands folded. The ministry man stood by the window, looking out at darkness. Albus leaned against a bookshelf, his face calm. Tom stopped just inside the door. "Headmaster," he said politely. "Professor." Armando gestured to a chair. "Sit, Tom." Tom sat, posture straight, eyes attentive. He did not appear nervous because nervousness invited questions. The ministry man turned. His gaze swept Tom like a blade. "This... the boy?" Armando nodded. "Yes, Tom Riddle, 1st year." The ministry man's mouth tightened. "Hardly seems likely, does it?" Tom kept his face neutral. Likely for what? He wondered. But he knew, even before it was said, that he had been brought here because Albus had suggested it. Armando cleared his throat. "We have reason to believe, Tom, that you might have noticed something. Anything unusual. We're speaking to several students." Tom looked at Armando, then at Albus. Albus's blue eyes held his steadily. "Unusual," Tom echoed. "Mild. Aside from everyone panicking?" The ministry man snorted. "Clever. Do it." Armando's gaze was weary. "Tom, do you know anything about these incidents? Anything at all? Voices, sightings, oddities?" Tom considered his answer. Truth was a weapon too, but it was a weapon that could explode in your hand. He chose lies instead, shaped carefully to sound like honesty. "I've heard rumors," Tom said. "Everyone has. About a chamber. A monster. But I've seen nothing." Armando nodded slowly, as if disappointed but not surprised. The ministry man's eyes narrowed, skeptical. Albus spoke for the first time. "And you haven't heard anything unusual?" Tom met Albus' gaze and allowed a flicker of confusion, a child's bafflement. "No, Professor." Albus studied him. Tom felt the pressure of that gaze like weight on his shoulders. Albus was not searching for words. He was searching for something behind Tom's eyes. Tom let him see only what he wanted. A quiet boy, slightly pale, perhaps a little too controlled, but harmless. The ministry man shifted. "We'll speak to others. If anything happens again." He stopped, jaw tightening. "If it happens again, the governors may insist on closure." The word closure hit Tom like a cold hand. He did not show it. He kept his expression politely concerned. Armando sighed. "Let us hope it doesn't come to that." Albus's gaze remained on Tom. "Tom," he said quietly, "if you learn anything, you will tell me." Tom nodded. "Yes, Professor." Armando dismissed him with a tired wave. Tom rose, bowed his head, and walked out as if nothing had happened. In the corridor, his breath remained even. Only when he was 2 staircases away did he allow his face to harden. Albus had drawn him into the light. Not enough to burn him. Not yet. But enough that Tom could feel the heat. Tom returned to the common room and sat by the lake window, staring into the dark water. A pale shape drifted past the glass. For a moment, he imagined it was the basilisk, coiled beneath, unseen. He whispered, inaudible, in the language of stone. "Soon. Nanshaden." Not to the monster. To himself. The castle became a game board. Albus began to patrol at night, not like a teacher enforcing rules, but like a hunter moving through terrain he knew too well. Tom saw him once, late, at the edge of the 3rd floor, wand held casually, eyes scanning shadows with the calm patience of someone who expected danger to show itself, if given time. Tom watched from behind a tapestry, breath held, heart steady. He could have stepped out and greeted Albus politely. He could have asked what the professor was doing. But that would have been foolish. It would have invited scrutiny. Instead, Tom waited. Albus moved on, robes whispering, a quiet presence in the torchlit corridor. When he vanished around a corner, Tom eased his breath out. Albus was not relying on students to slip up. He was searching the castle itself. Tom began to search too, not for the monster, but for how Albus hunted. He listened to whispers of professors setting wards. He watched where patrolling pairs turned. He noted which corridors were suddenly empty, which staircases were blocked. The tightening grip made Tom's skin itch. He had tasted control, and now the castle was trying to close around his wrist. Eleanor approached him in the library that week, eyes bright with fragile hope. "No one's been hurt in days," she whispered. "Maybe it's over." Tom looked at her for a long moment. He thought of the basilisk sleeping in the chamber, coiled in darkness. He thought of the way it had resisted. He thought of the old command, blood and stone. "Maybe," Tom said. Eleanor's shoulders sagged with relief. "I've been writing home like everything's normal. My mom keeps sending me little things, sweets, like she can fix it from far away." Tom nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He felt something cold in his chest, not sympathy exactly, but a sharp awareness of vulnerability. Eleanor believed love could protect. Tom knew love was a weakness that could be used against you. That night, Tom wandered the corridors after curfew, not to open the chamber, but to learn the castle's roots more thoroughly. He had discovered a narrow passage behind a statue that connected 2 wings. He had found a stairwell that shifted only when stepped on by someone alone. He had learned that Peeves, an invisible, malicious presence, could be bribed with chaos. He leaned into shadow near a suit of armor and listened to Peeves' faint cackle echoing from a distant corridor. "Peeves," Tom whispered, voice low, careful. The cackle stopped. A moment later, a pair of floating, mismatched eyes appeared in the air, followed by the suggestion of a face. Peeves breathed, delighted. Little sneaky snake out of bed. Tom kept his face calm. "I have something for you." Peeves's eyes widened. "A treat? A trick? A secret?" "A distraction," Tom said. "The professors are watching. They hate chaos. I thought you might enjoy reminding them how little control they have." Peeves swelled with glee. "Oh yes. Oh lovely. What do you want?" Tom smiled. "Make noise in the west corridor, enough to draw attention." Peeves giggled. "And what do I get?" Tom's hand slipped into his pocket. He withdrew a small silver button, nothing valuable, but shiny, stolen from a prefect's cloak days earlier. He flicked it up. Peeves caught it midair, eyes gleaming. "Done!" Peeves whispered, and vanished with a pop dot. A moment later, a crashing sound echoed from the west corridor. A suit of armor toppled. A portrait screamed. Footsteps thundered, professors rushing. Tom moved the opposite way, slipping into a narrow passage, heart steady. He did not need the distraction tonight, not for the chamber, but he needed to know he could create one if necessary. Control was always built in layers. As he emerged near the bathroom corridor, he paused. The air there was colder. The stones seemed to hum faintly. Tom did not open the entrance. He did not speak. He simply stood and listened. Deep beneath, in the belly of the castle, he imagined the basilisk breathing. He imagined Albus moving through corridors, searching. Tom's fingers curled. The game was tightening. Sooner or later, someone would stumble too close to the truth, and then Tom would have to choose, retreat or strike. It happened on a night when the castle was too quiet. The storm outside had passed. The air was cold, still. The torches burned steady, their flames untroubled. Even Peeves was silent, as if the poltergeist sensed something and chose, for once, to watch rather than interfere. Tom had been lying awake, listening to the lake's muted sound when the whisper slid through the stone again. Wake. Blood. Tom's eyes snapped open. He sat up, heart steady but sharp. No, he thought, and the thought was a command. Sleep. But the whisper was not coming from below this time. It was coming from the walls themselves, as if the castle had learned to speak without going through the chamber. Tom swung his legs out of bed and moved, silent, toward the dormitory door. He did not know why, not consciously. He only knew the whisper was stronger, and with it came a faint pressure, a sense of something shifting beneath the castle. He slipped into the corridor. The whisper guided him, urgent. No, now. Tom moved faster, still quiet. He passed sleeping portraits. He turned corners without hesitation, as if he had walked this route 100 times. The air smelled of damp and soap as he neared the bathroom corridor. A flicker of light ahead made him stop. A candle flame, small and trembling, moved at the far end of the corridor. Someone else was out of bed. Tom flattened against the wall, shadow swallowing him. He watched. Eleanor appeared, clutching a candle in one hand, her robe pulled tight around her like armor. Her face was pale. Her eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and determination. Tom's mind raced. Why would she be here? Had she been summoned by the whisper? She could not hear it. Only he could, unless the castle was calling people in other ways, through dread, through rumor, through the simple pull of curiosity. Eleanor paused at the bathroom door, hesitating. Her candlelight wavered. Tom's breath held. A part of him wanted to step out, to stop her. Not because he cared about Eleanor, but because he cared about control. Eleanor in the wrong place at the wrong time was a variable. But stepping out would reveal he was here too. Eleanor pushed the door open and slipped inside. Tom waited 2 heartbeats, then moved, silent as a thought. He reached the bathroom doorway and peered in. Eleanor stood near the sinks, candle held high, its flame reflected in glossy tile. She swallowed, looking around as if expecting someone. "I know you're not a ghost," she whispered, voice shaking. "I keep hearing things. People crying in here. I thought, maybe someone's hiding." Tom's jaw tightened. Crying. The broken stalled door. The old story of Myrtle did not exist yet, but the bathroom still carried a lonely echo, as if it anticipated tragedy. Eleanor stepped closer to the sink with the serpent engraving. She did not see the engraving. Her eyes were on the water pooled in the basin, still and dark. Tom felt the whisper surge, filling his skull. "Look. Look." He stiffened. "No. Sleep. Stop." But the air in the bathroom changed. It thickened, cold, like breath against skin. The pipes beneath seemed to hum. The basin water trembled, rippling without being touched. Eleanor leaned closer, frowning. That's odd." In the water's surface, something moved. A shadow, long and pale, sliding. Eleanor's eyes widened. Her candle trembled, throwing frantic light. Tom's hand shot out, too late, as if he could snatch her back from the moment. Eleanor's gaze locked on the reflection in the basin. Her breath caught. Tom saw in the water the basilisk's eye, an orb of pale, lethal light. Eleanor made a small sound, half a gasp, half a sob. Her body stiffened, not slowly, not gradually, but instantly, as if a switch had been flipped. Her candle fell from her hand. The flame hit the damp floor and sputtered out. Silence slammed into the bathroom. Tom stood frozen in the doorway, wand half raised, throat tight. Eleanor stood rigid by the sink, eyes open, face locked in shock. Petrified. Not dead. Not direct gaze. The basin had saved her in the cruelest way. Tom's mind snapped into ruthless motion. He could not leave her here. She would be found. Questions would be asked. The staff would search this bathroom again. And the basilisk, awake, had come up through the pipes without his command. Tom stepped forward, heart pounding now, not with fear but with anger. He hissed into the stone, voice low and vicious. "Sleep. Go back." The pipes vibrated faintly, and for a heartbeat Tom felt the basilisk's presence, enormous, satisfied, slipping away like a tide receding. The bathroom air lightened slightly, the pressure easing. Tom stared at Eleanor's rigid form. Her face looked younger, suddenly, and terribly vulnerable. He could not carry her alone. He could not drag her without leaving marks. He needed a story. He backed away from her, slipped into the corridor and ran, not loudly, but fast, controlled. He found the first patrol he could, a prefect and a professor rounding a corner. "Professor!" Tom cried, letting panic color his voice, letting it shake his hands. "Someone's in the bathroom. Eleanor Parker. She's not moving." The professor's face tightened. The prefect swore softly. They rushed past Tom toward the bathroom. Tom followed, breath ragged in a carefully performed way. In the doorway, Tom watched the professor's horror as she saw Eleanor's stiff form. The professor called for help, voice echoing. Footsteps thundered toward them. Tom stood just behind, eyes wide, looking like a frightened child. Inside, cold and silent, his mind was a blade. Eleanor had been the wrong variable in the wrong place. But the worst truth was this: the basilisk could wake without him. And now the school had another victim, found in the very place the chamber's entrance hid. If Albus had been watching before, he would watch twice as hard now. The hospital wing smelled of clean linen and bitter potions. Eleanor lay in a bed near the window, rigid as a statue, her eyes open to the ceiling. Madame Pomfrey, stern, efficient, muttered as she examined her, wand moving in precise patterns. Other petrified students lay in nearby beds, each a silent accusation. Armando arrived within minutes, his face drawn. Horace followed, breathless, cheeks flushed with fear. Albus came last, calm as ever, and the calm looked unnatural against the starkness of the wing. Tom stood near the doorway, hands clasped, eyes lowered like a boy ashamed of surviving. Madame Pomfrey straightened. "Petrified," she said sharply. "Same as the others. No lasting damage if we can find the cause." Armando's shoulders sagged with a mixture of relief and despair. "Thank goodness," he murmured, then immediately looked ashamed of the gratitude, as if gratitude were an insult to Eleanor's frozen body. Horace's voice trembled. "This is getting worse. That girl, Muggle-born, in the bathroom of all places." Albus's gaze drifted toward Tom. Tom felt it like a hand on his throat. "Tom," Armando said, turning. "You found her?" Tom swallowed, letting his voice wobble. "Yes, Headmaster. I was walking back from—" He hesitated, as if ashamed. "I heard something. I thought someone was crying. I went in and she was just like that." Albus watched him, expression unreadable. Madame Pomfrey sniffed. "Crying? There's no one crying in that bathroom." Tom's heart kicked once. He forced a confused look. "I thought maybe I imagined it." Armando frowned. "Students' nerves are strained," he said, as if that explained everything. Horace wiped his brow. "We should close the school, temporarily, at least until—" Armando's voice sharpened. "We cannot simply shut Hogwarts because we are frightened." Horace's eyes flashed with panic. "We can if someone dies, Armando. The governors." The word die hung in the air like smoke. Tom's mind tightened. He could not allow death. Death would close the school. Death would send him back. Albus spoke quietly. "There may be a way to protect students without closure," he said. "Increased patrols. Restricting movement. Perhaps we should consider the possibility of a creature," Madame Pomfrey snapped, impatient. "This isn't a hex from a student. Not with the pattern. Not with the consistency." Armando's face looked older by the second. "We have considered it," he said. "We are investigating." Albus's gaze remained on Tom. "Tom," he said softly, "when you heard the crying, did you hear any other sound? Footsteps? Scraping? A voice?" Tom forced himself not to flinch. He let uncertainty flicker. "No, Professor." Albus nodded slowly, as if tasting the lie. "Very well." Armando dismissed Tom with a weary gesture. "Go back to your dormitory," he said, "and stay there after curfew, all of you." Tom bowed his head. "Yes, Headmaster." He left the hospital wing and walked through the corridor outside, heart beating hard now. The mask of fear dropped as soon as he was out of sight. His face hardened. His mind raced. The basilisk had acted on its own. If it woke again, if it killed someone, the school would close. Tom would lose everything. He would not let that happen. He would not be dragged back to wolves like a discarded thing. He slipped into a shadowed alcove and pressed his forehead briefly against cold stone, forcing his thoughts into order. He needed to bind the basilisk more tightly. He needed to understand the magic that held it. He needed to know why it woke. Old command, it had said. Blood. Purpose. Tom thought of the book in the library, the dry paragraph about a chamber and a monster. He thought of Slytherin's ideology, the poison of purity. Perhaps the basilisk did not need Tom to wake. Perhaps the fear above had stirred it, like scent stirring a predator. Tom's jaw clenched. The monster was a weapon, and a weapon must not act without the wielder's hand. He would go back down. He would make it sleep again, deeper this time. And if the castle demanded blood to soothe the old magic, Tom would find a way to give it blood without losing the school. Tom pushed away from the stone, expression smooth again, and walked back toward the dungeons as if he were only a frightened boy obeying orders. Inside, the chamber waited. So did Albus' eyes. Albus summoned him the next evening. Not with a prefect. Not with a public request, but with a quiet message slipped to Tom after dinner. Professor Dumbledore wishes to see you. Tom did not show hesitation. He rose and followed the student messenger out, as if this were an honor. The classroom Albus chose was empty, lit only by a single candle and the cold moonlight that spilled through tall windows. Desks sat in rows like silent witnesses. Dust floated in the air, caught in the pale light, drifting like ash. Albus sat at the front desk, hands folded. He did not stand when Tom entered. He simply looked up, and the blue eyes fixed on Tom with that same unsettling awareness. "Sit, Tom," Albus said. Tom sat. Silence stretched between them, long enough that another child might have squirmed. Tom did not. He watched Albus, waiting. Albus spoke at last, voice low. "You were in that bathroom." Tom kept his expression mild. "Yes, Professor. I told the headmaster. I found Eleanor." "You found her," Albus repeated as if tasting the phrase. "And you heard crying." Tom nodded. "Yes." Albus leaned back slightly. "Do you know what is peculiar about that bathroom?" Tom's mind flashed through possibilities. The entrance, the sink, the serpent engraving, the chamber. He made his face blank. "No." Albus's gaze held him. "It is rarely used," he said. "It has a long history of being overlooked." Tom said nothing. Albus continued quietly. "When I visited you at the orphanage, you had already discovered something about yourself. That you could make things happen. That you could influence the world around you." Tom's stomach tightened. He did not let it show. "I don't know what you mean." Albus's eyes narrowed slightly. "You know exactly what I mean." Tom met his gaze without flinching. He could feel the old anger, hot and sharp. But he kept his face calm. Anger was weakness. Albus's voice softened, not with pity but with something more dangerous. Sincerity. "You are very intelligent, Tom, and you are very alone." Tom's lips curved faintly. "I'm not alone. I'm at Hogwarts." Albus watched him. "Hogwarts is a place," he said. "It's not the same as belonging." Tom felt something cold tighten inside him. Albus was trying to reach for something Tom did not allow anyone to touch. "I belong where I choose to belong," Tom said quietly. Albus's gaze sharpened. "And if you chose to belong to something darker?" Tom's smile did not reach his eyes. "I don't understand." Albus's fingers tapped the desk once, soft. "You may not understand," he said, "but I do. The pattern of these attacks is deliberate. The fear is deliberate. Someone is using the castle's secrets." Tom held very still. Albus leaned forward slightly. "If you know anything, Tom, I am giving you an opportunity to speak now. Not to the ministry. Not to Armando. To me." "Nani, Badiaway. Bandena." Tom looked at Albus and felt, for a moment, the strange pull of honesty that Albus' calm created. The temptation to confess, not out of guilt, but out of the desire to see what Albus would do, to test him. Tom did not yield. "I don't know anything," Tom said, voice steady. "I'm a first year." Albus's eyes held his. Being young does not mean being innocent. Tom's heart beat once hard. He kept his face smooth. "Are you accusing me, Professor?" Albus' gaze did not waver. "I am watching you." The words fell like a blade. Tom felt cold spread through him, slow and sure. Watching. Always watching. Albus would not stop. Albus would not be fooled forever. Tom let his smile sharpen, polite but edged. "You can watch me all you like," he said softly. "You won't find anything." Albus' expression did not change. "Perhaps not," he said. "But watching is sometimes enough to prevent harm." Tom rose smoothly, as if dismissed, though Albus had not spoken the dismissal. Tom understood power games. He would not sit and be judged any longer than necessary. "May I go, Professor?" Tom asked. Albus nodded once. "Yes. Good night, Tom." "Num. Da." Tom inclined his head and walked out, steps measured. Only when the door closed behind him did he allow his face to harden fully. Watching is sometimes enough to prevent harm. Tom's fingers curled. Albus thought he could prevent harm by watching. Albus thought he could cage Tom with attention. Tom walked through the moonlit corridor, and in his mind a new certainty formed, cold and bright. One day, Albus would not be the watcher. One day, Albus would be watched. Tom went to the lake after curfew, not by choice but by necessity. The castle felt too close tonight, its corridors too full of eyes, its portraits too quick to stir. Outside, the air was cold enough to sting. The grounds were dark, the grass wet beneath his shoes, the trees black silhouettes against the moon. He walked to the edge of the black lake and stopped. Mist drifted over the water, thin as breath. The castle rose behind him, a fortress of stone and shadow, windows glowing like watchful eyes. Tom stared at his reflection in the lake's surface. Moonlight made his face look paler, sharper. His eyes looked older than 11. They looked like they belonged to someone who had already decided what he would become. He thought of Eleanor lying rigid in the hospital wing. He thought of the other petrified students, the way their stillness had turned them into symbols. He thought of the whispers in corridors, the fear, the pride, the hatred. He thought of the basilisk beneath, sleeping, perhaps. He thought of Albus's calm voice, his blue eyes, his statement, "I am watching you." Tom's mouth tightened. He could not allow the monster to wake again. Not while Albus was hunting. Not while the ministry hovered. Not while closure threatened like a knife at his throat. He would bury the basilisk deeper in sleep. He would return to the chamber and bind the command with every ounce of will he had, wrapping it around the creature like chains. And he would not open the chamber again until he was ready. Ready meant older, smarter, armed with spells and knowledge that went beyond the first year's lessons. Ready meant understanding how Slytherin had made a monster obey, how he had sealed the chamber so perfectly it had endured centuries. Tom stared out over the lake, and the mist shifted, revealing for a moment the dark shape of the island in the center. Trees clustered like a crown of thorns. Something moved in the water, slow, massive, then vanished again. The world was full of monsters. The difference was who commanded them. Tom breathed in cold air and let it fill his lungs until it hurt. Pain was grounding. Pain reminded you were alive, and being alive meant you could still reshape things. He turned his head slightly, looking back at the castle. In one lit window high in a tower, a figure moved. Just a shadow, perhaps a teacher on patrol. Tom could not see who it was. He did not need to. He could feel Albus's presence even without sight, like a pressure. Tom's fingers curled into fists. "I won't be trapped," he whispered to the night. The words were not for the lake, not for the castle, not even for the basilisk sleeping under stone. They were for the boy he had been at Wool's, staring at cracked plaster and swearing never again. The wind tugged at his robe. The mist swirled. Tom turned away from the lake and walked back toward the castle with measured steps, his resolve settling like iron. He would be careful now. He would be patient. He would let the fear cool, let the school breathe again, let Albus' watchfulness dull with time. And when the moment came, when he was old enough, powerful enough, untouchable enough, he would open the chamber again, not as a frightened orphan desperate to keep his refuge. As the heir, the castle had called. As the voice, the monster answered. As the boy who would become something far worse than anyone watching him could imagine.